Okay, we are live on YouTube and we have a quorum, so we can begin whenever you are ready.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the first Design Review Commission meeting of this year, January 13th, 2021. So we're going to open up with roll call this evening. So Eugene?
Aye. Here.
John? Armand?
Here.
And Kristen?
Here.
And I'm here. Glenn. Okay, second item is adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Move to adopt.
I'll second it.
Seconded. All in favor, say aye. So we're going through again. Armand?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Eugene?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And Glenn is aye. Third item is public comments. This is items that are not on today's agenda or within the purview of the commission. Do we have any raised hands or *9 call-ins?
I do not see any raised hands or *9s.
Okay, thank you. On to items 4A and 4B on the consent calendar. 4A is a project that that you discussed last meeting, and it was put on today's calendar, and they're asking for it to be continued to the next meeting. And the other is a project that was pulled by the applicant. So do I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
I motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. So all in favor, say aye. Armin?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Eugene?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And Glenn is aye. Okay, item 5A. This is the HDP 13-20 for doing business as La Miranda Properties. It's for a property at the intersection of Sierra Vista Way and Sessions Road. So can we have the staff report by Jonathan?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. HDP 1320 was last heard by the DRC on December 16th. At that meeting, the Commission's comments covered a variety of things: light pollution, landscaping, privacy, and massing. First, wanted to start off by going over those comments and discussing how they have or have not been addressed. So the DRC asked the applicant to replace the elderberry along the eastern property line with an evergreen species. The applicant has revised the landscape plan and replaced the 14 elderberry with oleander, which is an evergreen species. The commission also asked the applicant to reduce the impacts of light pollution along the driveway, specifically for vehicle lights and headlights potentially flashing into the neighbor's residence. So the height of that retaining wall has increased by a foot from 3 feet to now 4 feet. And then again, those oleanders those elderberries have been replaced with oleanders, which will provide screening to that light pollution year-round as an evergreen species. The Commission asked the applicant to explore reorienting the decks towards Sessions Road. You might recall that the applicant's privacy study at the last meeting illustrated that there could be a potential privacy impact from the lower level deck looking into the side yard patio of the neighbor at 1139 Sierra Vista Way. So they've reoriented that deck towards Sessions Road so that those views are no longer directed into the side yard. And then this little piece here, this triangular shaped piece, would be for landscaping. The commission asked for 3D views to simulate how views would look from the neighbor's outdoor living space. And they've provided 3 renderings, which I'll pull up here. So the first rendering shows views from for the front elevation, kind of exaggerated outward view showing the front elevation. You can see the deck oriented towards Sessions Road, and there's the upper garden level deck here, which we'll talk about in a second, and also shows the topography in relationship to the hillside and the neighbor down here to the east. The second rendering simulates views from the neighbor's outdoor living space looking upwards to the east elevation at the proposed residence. You can see that the retained vegetation largely screens views from the kitchen and bedroom 3 at the eastern elevation, but the rendering also demonstrates or illustrates that there's a potential privacy impact from the garden level deck looking into the outdoor living space at to the east, as there's a gap in vegetation between these 2 retained redwoods. And the last rendering, this vantage point is from the corner of the neighbor's side yard and rear yard, and that more or less shows tells the same story. The lower level deck has views directed to Sessions Road, and there is a concern about the upper level deck at the garden. The commission also asked the applicant to study ways to soften the massing at the east elevation, which they've done here. So you can see at the east elevation, previously there was the solution to screening the lower level deck was a wooden enclosure around the wooden level deck that increased the appearance of the chimney by basically doubling it in size. So that's been tailored back. That enclosure is no longer needed since the deck is directed into the other direction. So there's a clear separation now between the chimney, which has vertical wood siding, and the enclosure, which has horizontal wood siding. The commission also asks for the applicant to make the plans at a larger scale and more detail, and adding more detail. These plans have been redrawn at the same scale, but they are more legible. We've gotten comments back from the city engineer, and he is satisfied with the conceptual drainage plan and recommends that the final drainage plan be required as a condition of approval, which is a standard COA. And then a few more items. The commission asked the applicant to provide more site sections from the proposed residence to 1139 Sierra Vista Way. The applicant revised their privacy study, which includes a couple of site sections, but those have been revised with, again, the decks reoriented to the other direction. The last 2 items, the commission asked the applicant to provide more details on the retaining wall along the driveway. That hasn't been provided, but is likely going to be discussed during the applicant's presentation. And then the commission also asked for the applicant to provide a higher resolution context map, and that will be shared also during the applicant's presentation. So staff is generally supportive of the project, finding that the applicant has been cooperative in studying solutions and addressing the commission's comments thus far for this physically constrained site. But staff's remaining concern is, again, that upper floor deck, finding that the modifications that they have made have not addressed the commission's comments on privacy. So the applicant will present a few options for the garden level deck, which will hopefully address those privacy concerns. I wanted to point out that the Permit Streamlining Act deadline is January 31st, 2021. This means the commission must either adopt a resolution of approval or denial at the January 27th meeting. If the commission is leaning towards denying the project, then those reasons for denial in response to the required findings must be explicitly laid out today, so that we can prepare a resolution for denial on the 27th. If the commission is leaning towards approving the project, then the commission should provide specific direction to the applicant and direct staff to prepare an approval resolution for the January 27th meeting. So again, the next and final meeting that this item is going to be heard is on January 27th. So today's meeting is important in resolving any remaining concerns or stating the reasons for denial. And here for any questions.
Commissioners, any questions? Raise your hand or so indicate. Okay, no direct questions at this time, Jonathan. So let's move on to the applicant.
Thank you. This is Tim Ward. As Jonathan mentioned, thank you, Jonathan. He's kind of, we've tried to answer many of your questions at the last meeting by, obviously the realigning the deck and some of the architectural elements. There were the remaining questions that Jonathan mentioned. Jonathan, if you could put up, let's talk about the retaining wall. We did have a visual, which Jonathan pointed out was too small, but on our materials board of this split face block retaining wall. And I sent it to Jonathan. I don't know, Jonathan, if you have it there, just to show that material. It's a gray split face block, essentially. Yeah, that's it. And this is the wall that we're intending to use on both sides of the driveway, as well as the raised wall at the backup of the parking, which was an issue in terms of making it high enough so that, the headlights and the car lights and things like that don't infringe on the neighbor's privacy. So the second item that Jonathan was asking about was about the context map. I'm sorry about that. So we did provide one. It's unfortunately, when you get these maps, the county has different versions of the buildings, of the adjacent buildings. So I picked the one that looked most detailed, so that, and in some cases, so you can kind of see the adjacent houses, their sizes, their estimated finished floor heights based on the contour maps, and the number of floors each one has. And obviously you can see that the one we're concerned with the most, of course, is 1139, which is the closest neighbor. The one across the street and up the hill is elevation 480, and we're at 72, and that's, they're quite a bit up the hill. So, and that, all right, so that was one of the other items. And then the third item that Jonathan suggested we deal with was concern about this garden deck, which we eliminated. And we feel we need some kind of deck up there because there really isn't a lot of outdoor space for this property. So what I suggested was, and sent to Jonathan, was a way so that we could retain a small deck up there, but make it clear that you can't really use any other part of that roof. So Jonathan, if you could just put up that roof plan. What we've done is essentially relocated all the solar panels onto the lower deck so that there's an upper deck that faces directly towards Sessions, and the sod roof is on the upper deck, but this former garden sod roof area is now all solar panels. So I kind of think that sort of doesn't invite anybody out there at all. And we do have railings. Are you able to get that one, Jonathan, or is that?
Yeah, I'm looking for it. If you have it ready, you can share your screen also.
Oh, no, I don't. I mean, I could hold it up, but basically I don't. It's what it is essentially is the same roof plan, but with reversing where the sod roof is and the which then is a full story above this patio area. So that we've moved the solar array down, and the sod roof I'm showing is a full floor above that patio. So it's not accessible for anybody. And obviously the solar array area takes away any opportunity, I think, to jump the rail and use that area as some kind of a outdoor area. So I felt this is a way to sort of give us a deck which is purely away from the neighbor and purely looks directly at Sessions Road, but gives us an outdoor space aside from the one at the lower floor, but doesn't give anybody opportunity to go on that other deck where the solar panels are. I don't know. I think that's pretty much the items that I think you had raised as a commission and Jonathan had pointed out to me. So I'll certainly take questions.
Okay, do we have questions from any of the commissioners? John?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Thanks. I'm looking at the perspective view from the neighbor's yard, looking up the hill at the house through the redwoods. Jonathan, can you share that so that we can all look at the same thing?
Yes, certainly.
There we are. Thank you. You know, this is the view from the neighbor's house. And am I right? This is simulating the view from their patio space?
Pretty much from the closest corner.
I think there's also one from the patio. Am I right? Maybe it doesn't matter which one.
The other one is from their patio, which is further over. Oh yeah, this is the closest corner. Yeah.
Right. So we were looking at the correct image.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to appreciate what you've done on the lower deck and the lower part. I think that's very effective in addressing the privacy concern from that part of the house. The sod deck, which is not intended to be used and is not really probably safe for use since there's no railings or anything like that. But just to confirm, in this image, that is all the way up on the upper right, and it looks like it's fairly well into that upper redwood tree. Is that correct?
You mean that little planter? Are we talking about that planter or?
On the very highest part of the roof where there's a sod area that is not intended to be occupied?
Right.
Is that in the redwood trees in this image?
That's not accessible from anywhere except a ladder.
Okay, and that's in the redwood trees in this image?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually right where the hand is. Jonathan's
right,
got the hand right there. It's just above that.
I see. Okay. And then tell me, there is I'm not looking, look at the other image looking up the hill, not the one from this corner, but the next one. There we are. There is a window right next to the chimney.
Yeah, that is up. The sill of it is at 9 feet.
Okay, answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's way up. The only real window is to the right side of the chimney that's at ground level at level 72. Is right there. Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit.
All right. That answers my question about what's what. Thank you.
Okay. Thank
I have a question to the
Yeah.
chair. To the architect, Mr. Ward. I do appreciate the lower level shifting of the form to create a little more relief there. That seems to be very effective, as Commissioner Gray alluded to. The upper terrace, or the what do you call solar panel location, I want to make sure that, you know, we sometimes give entitlement and permit, but over the years, ownership changes or the family grows and you go like, oh, where can we capture more exterior outdoor space or some livable area? So one of the things that I'd be concerned is that right now, as today's presentation alludes to, that there is no guardrail and there's solar panel on it, but those are elements that could potentially disappear. The solar panel in the future, new technologies could be there, or something else happens with the lifestyle of the new owners, and that could disappear. And let's make that more usable rooftop. And then let's also screw in or bolt in new guardrails up there to allow our family to use that. So my narrative here is that I'm not saying that the current owner or the occupants in the future may do that, but there's a potential variations that could happen that would be beyond the city's control unless we put in additional conditions of approval that will permanently, forever in what's that, in perpetuity. That,
Yeah, that's the one. And we have no problem with that.
okay, very good.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's all the comment I have. And yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
I have a question. Is the plant or tree that is between, I would say, the chimney and the patio off the kitchen, is that an existing, or is this part of the oleander, or what am I looking at between the tall redwood tree and the chimney on
On
that,
the landscape plan?
on the distant view that we were looking at on the screen?
Oh. Yeah,
you-
those are part of the planting that actually runs along the property line.
Existing?
No, that's proposed.
That's proposed.
We only
So,
really have those two trees. Well, we have three trees going along there.
okay, so this bush that's shown between those, I don't know, if Jonathan moves his cursor, I can, a little bit further
Up the hill,
uphill,
right
right,
there.
and go up that, right there, right? That bush that's right above his hand. How high is that bush?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think these bushes, what I understand, will be 5 to 7 feet tall, and we certainly you could make a condition that we plant it more excessively there, because that is the closest window to looking at the neighbor, and we have no problem blocking, looking down and look straight across the hill. That's,
Well, the problem that I have is that if you look at the other oleanders that you have, or the bushes that are going up the slope, suddenly you have one that is much larger right there. But the truth of the matter is that even though the Western gardener will tell you you can get oleanders up to 20 feet high, if you look at established oleanders in Lafayette, most of them aren't higher than about 12 feet. And if you're starting out at 5 to 7 feet, it seems like that window is exposed right away.
what, in looking at A 3.1, we have one oleander, which is next to tree 571. And then we have 3 toyons. Yeah, I'm certainly open to anything that does more screening. So if you have a suggestion, we'll do it.
Well, I don't necessarily want to pick out your trees for you, but I'm just saying it seems to me that if that's the oleander, it's not going to be that high that as you're showing on your view, and it's not going to grow to that height in any reasonable amount of time. I mean, you could put in a live oak, which is an evergreen, and will be, but I guess the second question that I have, and we have not talked to the adjoining property owner, is whether or not the applicant is willing to allow for, or if the next door neighbor is it's acceptable, is to have some plantings actually on the borderline of their property in order to fill in those voids. I just don't see that what you've demonstrated here is being reality. That's my concern. The lower oleanders, yes, but suddenly one of them just happens to grow, in front of the window higher than normal. That doesn't seem feasible.
Well, even if it's as low as the other bushes, you wouldn't even see the head of that window, of that door slider. I mean, that hand is right at 7 feet, the head of the window. Whether it goes up further up into the skylight area, I don't know, but even at that low point.
Well,
Yeah.
what is up above that?
That's part of the skylight that is into the kitchen. There's no view out of it. There's no,
Okay.
it's an
Okay,
open
so-
area.
Okay. Well, let's wait. I assume that the neighbors might be on the Zoom session tonight. We'll see. John,
I was going to say on this issue, if we look at the building elevation on sheet A 2.2, maybe we can understand what would be blocked and what would not be blocked by planting at this area. The east elevation has a sliding door, and then the window up above it is a clear story, if I'm understanding this.
okay, so A 2.2. Okay, so most of what I'm seeing as glass area is the clear story and not the door. Okay,
So right below that letter E, Mr. Ward, are you saying that door would be screened even by a lower shrub than what you've shown in the
Yeah,
perspective?
from the view that we gave you, and we're certainly willing to put more shrubs there. I mean, we've got kind of a string of them on A 2.3 and, or excuse me, A 3.1. Obviously, opposite that door, there's some areas there between those tree 571 and 578 that you could put more trees or shrubs. Basically, I think shrubs would do the job more than a tree for sure.
I have a question. What's the program in front of that door?
Oh, it's just
Is
part
it
of it,
patio?
a retaining wall there and a little patio. And it's more to just so that we could have a door out of the living room to that side. And so there's a patio that's approximately 4 by 6.
okay, any other questions for the applicant? Okay, that opens us up to public comments. Do we have any raised hands or star nines?
We do. So if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen or press star 9 if you're calling in. Looks like Pam Swartz would like to make a comment, so I'll promote her to panelist now. Hi, Pam, you're in the meeting if you'd like to unmute and share your public comment.
So Pam, you have 3 minutes only.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. First of all, thank you everybody for being so detailed about this, because there are a lot of concerns that we still have, and I do hope that you read our letter, because we said a lot of them in there. We have a couple more things we wanted to say. The 3D simulated view from our yard is really misleading. It really doesn't look like that when you go out there. And I know it's hard to get something that's completely accurate in a simulation, but that's the whole point. It's a lot less, the view line is a lot more open from the house than you can imagine if you look at the actual landscape. And we're concerned a little bit also about some of the things you mentioned, what's preventing future owners from trimming their oleanders or that taking down a redwood tree or any of those things that we're trying to mitigate the privacy issue. I think that there's a lot of question about that, and there's really no guarantee. As much as I would love the idea of the language in perpetuity, I'm not sure, and I'm not confident that that's going to protect our privacy in the future. The other thing is the same thing with the windows. I mean, what's restricting future owners from changing windows and that type of thing? And also, I'm a little concerned about this sod deck roof that supposedly won't be accessible. I think that's, wishful thinking, but I mean, obviously we can't guarantee that no one's going to use that sod area for something else. And as Mr. Ward pointed out, there really isn't a lot of yard in the room or on the property, usable yard. So I'd like to see that addressed a little bit closer. We also have concerns about the driveway elevations and the details to that. We haven't seen that and how it will affect on our house bedroom windows, which are all on that corner. We'd really love to see that, as well as the headlights that are going to be, we're going to see more of that going up the hill. And let's see, what else was there? And we also mentioned in our letter about the 3 trail parking spaces that seem to have just disappeared, and we haven't heard any kind of answer about that. But we think that's a real disservice to the community and the public, because along that curve of Sierra Vista Way, there's no parking, and there's no parking on Sessions Road. So it needs to be addressed, because how are people going to access the trail if they have to park way down on the street? And lots of that is also prohibited because of parking. And let's see if there's anything else I wanted. There was one more thing. Let's see. Oh, the context map that you just showed, I hadn't really seen that before, but I also would like to point out that it's also misleading, because as I pointed out in the past to the overhead aerial that Jonathan always provides to give us kind of an idea of where the property is, that context map shows the property line literally on top of our house, and it really is 10 feet further to the west. So that makes that whole area of buildable space much more narrow. And that's why we're having all these problems, because what you guys are looking at, it's similar to what's happening out there, but it really isn't accurate.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Pam? I have a question for you. So would it be acceptable if the developer planted some additional bushes on your property so that you would have control over those and make sure that people could not trim them or otherwise disturb them?
I think that
realize
would be,
it affects your dog that likes to walk along the fence, but
I'd have to discuss that with my husband. But again, I mean, that might prevent us from seeing them more, but because they are so high on that very steep hill, I mean, the rendering also doesn't show accurately the steepness of the hill. It looks a little bit more flat. I don't know that it would help. And I don't know that it would hurt, but I don't know that it would really make that big of a difference. But I'll be happy to talk to my husband about it.
okay. Any other public comments this evening?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, Commissioner. Well, we're moving on now.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner, who wants to start the discussion this evening?
Actually, so the applicant does get 5 minutes rebuttal.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry. Tim, you have any rebuttal?
No, but it sounded like the neighbor wanted to say something else, so I certainly would give her a little time to do that. I think she wanted to. Pam, I think you wanted to say something else.
I just wanted to say, I know we're up against this deadline of January 31st, and so some decisions have to be made, but I feel that there's still so many outstanding issues that are, and I'm so glad that you guys are aware of them, that I just hate to have this rushed. I just feel that if it's not fully 150% ready for approval, that it should be denied.
Okay, so let's move on. Tim, do you have any other?
A couple things. One, I did in the privacy thing, I showed the section with the raised wall at the backup for cars. So it's now at 5 feet, and that will block any headlights, probably even truck headlights, of a big truck. At this point, I think, Jonathan, there's a section that you could, for that privacy area. Anyway, as far as the context map, our survey, if you look at our survey, I think what happens is that the house there's the 5-foot wall now at the retaining wall. At one point it was 3 feet, and I think one of you on the design review wanted it higher. And so I think 5 feet should be plenty for any headlights or anything like that. But then going to the property line thing, the closest the house is to the property line is 5 foot 8 inches, according to our survey. And with overhangs, it's very easy in this context map to make it look like it's almost on top of it. And I was just using the county's maps, not mine. But we're certainly willing to plant more. And, as I said, having conditions of approval that prohibit anybody using that upper deck and having it just for solar panels or nothing is fine with us. So I think that's it. That's all I really.
Through the chair,
Yes.
if I may be out of sequence, but because what the neighbor mentioned, I want to ask Mr. Ward one more question, if I can, Chair. Mr.
Yes.
Ward, Mr. Ward,
Yes.
I know that we're dealing with the exterior and the public areas. That's our main concern. But can I ask you a hypothetical here? That top deck piece that we're discussing, and much of the concern from the neighbor is also about that as well. Have you explored other options such as working toward a similar massing orientation that you've started to do on the lower level, which has been very effective? Did you try a scheme? I know it may impact your structural ordering principles and may affect some of the daylight feature you're trying to get into that space with clerestory window. Can you tell us why it wouldn't work, or have you tried other options with that deck? In other words, the form of that is no longer gridded with the grid of the building, but it also is shifting and rotated similar to the floor below, and it would step away. So your deck would be triangulated rather than squarish, so that you have more relief from the neighbor's side. And still, it's a deck that no one's going to use, but that may be a problem for a certain reason. Can you explain to us if you try that and tell us what professional on your side think that may not work for you?
And are we talking about the upper deck? Or
I'm talking about the massing of that upper deck. So what I'm looking at is the lower level, which you've effectively reoriented and twisted the form to allow you to have the visual privacy and relief. Hello? I'm talking about the clerestory level, that deck level, that form. Can you triangulate that as well so that it further sets away from the property line? So it's no longer parallel to the property line. It's more in relationship to the massing of the lower level that you started to do, which is very effective. I'm not saying, I'm not the architect here. I'm just asking you, have you studied that?
I think, one of the other things for that upper deck, just in terms of making sure that it's never used, we could put a low pitched roof on that, sloping from the skylights, because the skylights, you can see the skylight there has a curve of about 3.5 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And we could just make that a pitched roof, sloping to the parapet line at 3 and 12, 2 and 12, built up roof or metal, and just leave it at that.
Okay, that's certainly an idea. So you're saying you've studied, it's probably economics, there's probably structural issues There's other internal programming issues that I don't want to get into, and that's your your client's goals, and you got to do that. Ours is also only the exterior and public area. How about the patio to the deck? Is that easy to just get up? I forgot the section profile where the deck is. I mean, where the patio is to the deck. How much separation is there?
On the upper deck?
Yes, that
They're
deck
the
is the
same
only
level.
issue we have right now for me. Yes.
Yeah, they are the same level.
Oh,
The
okay.
same-
The patio and the deck are at the same level, right?
The sod, the one we're talking about in terms of being a solar panel now, as
Yeah.
opposed to sod roof, that's at the same level as that deck. And so that's why Jonathan wanted me to find an alternative. Now, I guess what I'm suggesting is we could make that a pitched roof sloping toward us in this particular view. So
Yeah.
it's not habitable at all.
Yeah, well, you're gonna have to be more convincing now that I know that it's at the same level. That bluish toned area that calls out as a patio in your plan with the green area that's called a deck. It's at the same plus or minus datum point. That's what I heard from you. So, okay, very good. So thank you for the offer. That might be another option we might consider. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair.
Okay, so,
Excuse me, may I ask
Yeah,
one
John.
question of the architect?
yes, John.
I'm sorry that this is out of sequence, but it was a question brought up by the neighbor, Ms. Swartz. Is there, Mr. Ward, is there any reason that we couldn't maintain the parking spaces up on Sessions Road that are used by hikers at that trail? Does this design impact that?
No, I don't think that's, we've always shown a gravel pullout, which they asked for in the first meetings because with the planning commission, because there were trucks that had trouble getting up that grade and people had to pull over. So we said, fine, we can do a pullout. Now, I don't know. I don't know where these I guess in our survey, we never had any parking areas that came out there. So I'm just not clear where that is.
I believe
Sierra Vista Way?
it's on Sierra Vista Way, and if I recall from being there, I believe it's just after you go around that first piece of curved road, kind of on the high side of the house. Does anybody else remember it that way? But it seems to me that this development doesn't impact it and that it could maintain it.
Hmm.
Yeah, we're not.
Well, when I went out there, I parked off of Sessions Road. I went up to beyond where the house would be. And there was no gravel or pavement, but there was a leveled off space that you could see tire treads in. And so to me, that was the logical place to pull over and park while I viewed the site.
I did the same. I agree. I didn't notice anything lower down.
Yeah, and that would not be impacted, and I'm not even sure it's on their property, but that would not be impacted by the construction at all. Maybe during the staging, but not long term.
Chair Cass?
Yes.
I could be mistaken, but I don't recall the parking spaces being discussed in the planning commission. I feel it would have come up at that point. The 50 wide trail easement was talked about in those meetings. So if the parking spaces are outside of the trail easement, then it's possible that the house could encroach upon it, but I assume that they're within the easement because they're for the use of the trail. So the house stays clear. I think it's a 5-foot setback from the trail easement. So it should be clear of those parking spaces.
Okay. Okay, so do we have comments now? Let's pick up comments. Who wants to start the comments on? No volunteers? Kristen, you went out there.
Yeah, I was there today. It's a beautiful site. I can see why someone wants to build a house there, and the people who are there now want to protect what they have. So it is beautiful out there. I'm impressed that the applicant has made so much consistent effort to try and maintain the privacy between the two properties. It seems to me that the big issue that we are trying to assess and trying to assure is that that privacy is maintained. So from what we've seen today, it seems like there are very few windows on that property line, or the windows that are there are either already going to be shielded because they're below plants, or they're high up enough that anyone standing inside the house can't see out there. So I feel that those efforts are meeting what we've asked. I think the other challenge is that the outdoor spaces will inevitably be able to see beyond, but my assessment of the site is that it's pretty, there's a lot of plants there, and that those provide a lot of natural screening. And I think we can ask the applicant, as we've discussed, to do more plantings, and that should, I would think, solve the problem. Seems to me the only remaining challenge is that very uppermost deck, and what the applicant can do to make everyone feel fully comfortable that there are things at that deck, whether it's an elevated green roof that is high enough up with plantings and a good railing that someone couldn't get there, or the solar panels. I think, as Eugene pointed out, having a difference in the datum would be compelling. The slope roof, to me, doesn't feel like it works with the massing of the house as well. I think that the horizontal lines are very consistently clear with what we're asking in the design standards. So I'm more inclined with seeing kind of a stepped condition between that patio area and the inaccessible deck. And I think if we were to see something like that, as well as an agreement to do more planting, that this project would be meeting what we've been asking for.
Okay. Armin? Comments, Armin?
I also appreciate the progress that the applicant made in this presentation, and the massing has developed much better from the previous one. I have a couple of concerns. One is that we are looking at the openings and the location of the openings, but also the location of that patio, which is opening to the great room. I think minimizing the outdoor spaces on the east side would help to mitigate that privacy concern of the neighbor. So I'm asking the applicant if removing that patio on the east side, that small patio, would be an issue. And if that's possible, I think that could help because from an open space, outdoor space, there is not a certain vantage point. There is kind of like, obviously, people, they could just walk around, and it would be more difficult to maintain privacy from an outdoor space. So that's one thing I'm asking. And then as I visited the site today, I noticed actually more sightlines to the neighbor's side on the lower portion of the site, as it was kind of like going up because of the density of the redwood and the landscape. It was naturally screening the neighbors. So I think on the driveway and entrance to the parking, there might be some heavier vegetation closer to the driveway that could help to create again that screen. And I think a lot of this goes back to a kind of like a landscape plan. So the type of this plants that they go there, that they could create this green screen, they could, I think that would be critical. And then the last concern I have is the type of landscape that we are proposing under redwood trees, because naturally, anything goes under redwood tree would have difficulty of growing because, their access to the daylight would be minimized. It's kind of like redwood would compete with any kind of plants, and it's the winner. So I think that's something we need to consider, that, these oleanders that they are going to grow 12 or 20 feet, is it something that would actually happen? And again, I'm not a landscape architect, but I think that's something that needs to go in as condition of approval, or more clear kind of review by landscape architects that could hold up in the future.
Okay. Eugene?
I think my two previous commissioners have said really well. I mean, very articulate. I don't think I can add anything better than what both of them have already alluded to. And I do totally agree and appreciate Kristen's clarity about what approach we would suggest the architect take to further articulate and address the concerns of the deck and the patio relationship. So that's it. So I think we want them to come back to us with that study and to convince us that it addresses adequately the privacy issue that we are concerned about that deck. That's it. Thank you.
John?
Thanks, Gene. Glenn. So I wanted to say that first of all, I think the applicant has been very responsive to our comments so far. This is the third time in recent months we've looked at this. I believe that the responses in general are effective. I think the remaining concerns that I have can be addressed with some simple conditions of approval. And I would say the first would be a restriction on the use of those portions of the roof that are not intended to be occupied as the design is right now. One is shown with solar panels, one is shown with planting. Just a condition of approval says those are not to be occupied now or in the future. The second is, I think, specific to the planting at that slider door to the kitchen area, where Glenn, you pointed out that there was a shrub that seemed unrealistically tall and dense right there. I would like to see staff have the opportunity to do a final review of the proposed planting installation before it's finalized to assure that there's sufficient screening density, especially at that location. And I believe that reasonably screens the small patio that Armin had commented on. I mean, I think it's nice to be able to open the door and get some fresh air and have something right there with reasonable density of planting. I don't believe that would contribute to a privacy concern. And finally, the third condition is I would like to see explicitly that the informal parking is maintained near the top of the property on Sessions Road. Other than that, I think that this has done a nice job in responding to a challenging set of design constraints.
And can I ask a question of you, John? What's your opinion on eliminating that little patio off the kitchen?
I personally don't feel that it's necessary if there's adequate shrub screening.
You don't think it's necessary to eliminate?
I don't think it's necessary to eliminate it. I think the patio could be maintained if there is sufficiently dense shrub screening at that part, because it's very low and tucked into the house right there.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I concur with many of the things. I did go to the site. This is my third visit to the site. And I did walk the fence line almost the entire site so that I would see exactly what was happening, as far as views and stuff like that. My concern is that area near that patio, that little kitchen patio, what would be grown there. And redwoods are sort of unique in the fact that their root structures are very near the surface. Not that digging in there will knock down the tree or anything like that, but one of the things that happens with redwoods is that their root structures just take over the nutrients for everything that's there. So 10 years down the line, you put in a bush and it doesn't look as vigorous as it was, And there are some bushes like coffeeberry that are very compatible that seem to work through the redwoods, being near the redwoods. But the problem is coffeeberries are only about 4 feet high. So I really think that they should have their landscape architect look at that in more detail so that they can increase the density of plantings in and near that area at around that 7 to 8 foot height so that it's basically shielding. That's why I brought up the question about whether the neighbor was more willing to have something on their yard, because actually their yard is a little bit more remote from the redwoods. So therefore, if they put oleanders or something in there, it would be, they would be able to not be as impacted by the redwoods. They would still be impacted, but not to the same extent. So I agree that I want to maintain any off-street parking that exists there on Sessions and improve the landscaping. Now, I guess I didn't understand the thing about the sloping of the roof because I thought Tim was indicating that the parapet was about 3 foot high. And I was thinking that they could do the sloping and still keep below the parapet. So in other words, from observation from the street, you wouldn't really see that much of a sloped roof. It would be hidden. And I'm not sure, maybe I didn't interpret that right, because I was thinking that the sloped roof would actually be a good alternative because it would create an unstable surface that wouldn't be conducive for further use and development. So, Tim, are you still on? Can you answer that am I seeing it wrong or who is seeing it wrong?
No, that's what I was thinking too, was you wouldn't, from the exterior, you wouldn't see the slope, but we'd make it so it was enough of a pitch you couldn't be walking on it.
Yeah.
And then we'd still have the solar panels. That'd be where they would go.
Yeah. So I would, yes, Kristen.
Would the solar panels be above the parapet, and do we have any concerns about seeing the solar panels? Or would they be flat? I guess it depends on how efficient you want them to be and whether they're angled.
Yeah, I mean, these would just be photoelectric ones. They're pretty flat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Through the chair.
yes,
Through the chair. On this kind of very sensitive site, I don't know what our city's done as a precedent, but in other jurisdictions, there's like a review period that you put in there. So let's say today we're probably not making a final decision until, we got one more meeting where the applicant can come back with some other further ideas and studies about particular deck patio. But ultimately in the final approval, we could put in a condition of approval where the city will review at 6 months, 1 year down, to see how vegetations grow, where some of the window alignment with vegetation and trees and things that have not been properly located. And then we could act on that to make the applicant, address those with the neighbor. So I think that would be something I would suggest on that property line in the future condition at the final approval. Okay.
Sarah, are we able to do that? I didn't think we were really able to do that.
Oh, okay.
It can be challenging once we sign off on the final inspection.
I see.
For us to kind of come back.
But that's why I think that if they have their landscape architect, he would know, they should know what is compatible and what will get up to that height to shield.
Okay. And then going back to Kristen's, observation about the solar panels and all of that, we really don't want to see solar panels with the subframes, those legs and the frames. They look really ugly. And so we got to be careful if we're allowing the solar panel to be there, that we put a condition that it be below some parapet line or it's stealthy, because it can look really ugly. And so I do appreciate Mr. Ward talking about slope, because it has to drain. Water has to drain from that flat roof anyways. And he's going to probably have a certain ways in which he's going to do that roof drainage plan. And so if we could kind of have that, make sure that happens, be good. But solar panel is a great idea, but make sure it's aesthetically pleasing to the eyes. Thank you.
Okay, so
Chair Cass?
Yes.
If the applicant is considering doing a pitched roof to the garden level deck, I'd ask that he speak on how that would affect the drainage plan, because the sod roof is a big component of collecting stormwater. Yeah. So maybe you could talk on that for a second.
Well, the only thing we were doing is sort of taking where the solar panels were before, which was a built-up roof on the upper part. So we were just switching the two areas. And that way we kind of kept the same runoff to our storage tank, same amount of area. So we were just saying that we move the sod up to the upper deck, the upper roof, which is about the same square footage as the lower, and then use the same built up roof, except in this case, we put a bigger pitch to it, like, 2 and 12 or something like that at least. And then we'd have the same drainage situation, I think, Jonathan.
Looking at this, looking at the section on A23, I think that's pretty clear that could work out.
Okay. Do we need to look at that, or?
I'll pull it up just to triple check we're on the same page. Let's see. So I just want to double check that the commission is on board with relocating the solar panels to the garden level deck shown here, and then the sod roof would be replaced at the top.
I'm on board on that. Do we want to go through a roll call and everyone on board on that or not?
I'm on board.
John?
Yes, I think it's an improvement.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Supportive.
Armin?
Yes.
Okay, so we're all in agreement on that change.
Okay. Make one more comment. So there was support for having a pitched roof to discourage it being used for outdoor living space. And then I also heard a condition that would regulate that use and not be allowed, write it down that it wouldn't be allowed for use as well. So is the commission wanting both as a minimum, or if the commission reviews the modifications at the next meeting and isn't supportive, would they rely on just the COA for its use?
I'd personally, I'd like both, because I don't want them taking out the camp and flattening out the roof and starting over again in the future. So I think you discourage them from the beginning, and then you make it part of the conditions. And it sort of is a belt and suspender approach on making sure it's not turned into public space. Anyone else have a major objection? Okay, so Jonathan, it looks like we're moving towards approving the project, and I guess we just need the resolution drafted up for next meeting.
Yes, I'll
And
if that's the motion, I'll prepare COAs. For the comment on the trail parking, I would be cautious about requiring it as a condition of approval if those parking spaces are located outside of the easement, and having folks use private property outside of an easement for a public purpose. So
Okay.
maybe more of an encouragement and not a written condition.
Jonathan, I'm pretty sure it's in the easement.
Okay, that's good.
okay. Okay, do we have a resolution, or do we create a resolution to continue, and you have the information sufficient to draft up the resolutions?
Yes, it would be a motion to continue to January 27th, and for staff to prepare resolution for approval and conditions.
Thank you.
So moved. So moved.
Okay,
Second.
Thank you. Let's go through roll call. Armin? Yay or nay?
Yay.
Kristen?
Yay.
Eugene?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And Glenn is aye. Okay, we're ready to move on to the next agenda item, which is item, what is it? It's item 5B, And again, this is a revisit to a recent project that is at, I thought it was at 777 Tanglewood, yes. 777 Tanglewood. So Jonathan is our planner. And whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. So I wanted to give a brief overview of where we are today. We have some new commissioners on the committee that haven't heard this project before, and also just a reminder to the public. HDP 0618 TAM is a phase 2 hillside development permit for the construction of a single family residence on a vacant parcel at 777 Tanglewood Drive. In 2013, the city of Lafayette issued a certificate of compliance, which determined that the parcel is a legal lot of record. As a legal lot of record, the property owner is entitled to viable economic use of the property. In this case, a single family residence is permitted by right in the R20 zoning district. The project is subject to our 2-phase review process since the property is vacant and in the hillside. The Planning Commission approved the phase 1 application back in September 2020 that established where the residence would be located and generally what size and what height it would be. That approval also included a review of environmental factors, and ultimately a list of mitigation measures were adopted to address the potential impacts arising from construction. So this phase 2 application looks at the design specifics of the project, including architecture, landscaping, colors, materials, lighting, and landscaping. The findings by which the commission is evaluating the project are found in the municipal code for hillside development permit design review. The city, as a public agency, is not responsible for enforcing the private CC&Rs of a homeowners association. So thank you. I just want to start with that. Now we can talk about some of the comments that were made at the last meeting by the commission and see how those have been addressed.
Can I ask you a question though, before we get into that? We're not responsible for enforcement of the CCRs, but say their architectural review does not approve major design aspects of this. Does it come back to DRC or what happens?
The architectural review, that's a private body. So for the commission's review and the city, it's reviewing the project against our findings, not what the homeowners association builds out. If we approve the phase 2 and the building permit application, they'll have the right to build just that. As for their issues, potential legal challenge with their homeowners association, that's something that the city would be hands off on.
Okay.
And then I'll just add that if there were some significant changes as it relates to that, then those may come back to you. So if they, through their homeowners association, made adjustments to the design that were in conflict with what you looked at, then that may come back to the design review commission.
Well, I'm only bringing this up because that we've gotten both times considerable comments about the industrial type design, or that's how they're phrasing it. So obviously, if they came back with craftsmen, it would, or the homeowners wanted a craftsman design, it would be a significant change in the project. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Jonathan. Sorry for interrupting.
No worries. So at the last meeting, the commission asked the applicant to study a height reduction and softening at the west and east elevations. And we'll touch on the west and east elevations in a second, but I just wanted to point out, as a result of changing the roof line to an arched roof, the height of the building, the total building height has increased by 1 foot and 8 inches compared to what was approved by the Planning Commission in phase 1, and also compared to what was seen by the DRC at the last meeting. So following that, the commission asked the applicant to study modifications to reduce the verticality at the east and west elevations. And they have achieved this at the east elevation. They've taken this plaster at the column here in the corner and wrapped it around the east elevation, creating a separation between the first floor and the second floor using color and material. their staff still has concerns with the east elevation, but we'll touch on that later in the presentation. The commission also asked the applicant to investigate the sightlines privacy impacts to the neighbor at 9 Cerro Encantado. So if you remember, there are two neighbors to the north, one being 1 Cerro Encantado, that's directly north, and then to the northwest is 9 Cerro Encantado. So they've provided a site section to 1 Cerro Encantado, but not 9 as requested by the commission previously. The applicant also has not provided the details and inspiration photos for the bridge and metal railing, but they may have some information on that during their presentation. As I mentioned at the beginning, the commission asked the applicant to consider a more inventive roof line to the flat roof that was previously shown across the residence. So it's best seen here on the east elevation where they have their arched roof. But again, as a result of that, the total building height has increased. The commission made a comment at the last meeting that landscape screening at the south elevation viewed from Tanglewood Drive was very important. The landscape plan along the south has not been augmented. No additional trees have been provided there, but some additional trees have been provided on the west and the east. Lastly, the commission asks the applicant to further consider adding some additional articulation at the south elevation. Again, pointing out that views and visibility from Tanglewood Drive were an important factor. So previously, there was one color material across this entire south elevation, but now they've broken it up a little bit, having the majority plaster and having a small portion wood siding. So staff still has some remaining concerns, even though there have been some improvements to the design. One is a general comment that still stands about the massing of the structure and having all 4 sides be a solid 2-story elevation. So the commission threw out some suggestions at the last meeting of stepping in the residence or stepping in the lower floor or stepping back the upper floor to match the slope of the hillside, but those changes have not been made yet. Staff finds that those modifications would better align the project with the findings for design review. And as you can see from the east elevation, you're still getting a clear 2-story element. And it might be that this can't be addressed without reductions in floor area or minor shavings here and there, but wanted to remind the commission that the planning commission's review of general massing and height, that's a maximum that the DRC can work within to request some reductions in shavings if it benefits the design. So the massing on the east elevation is still a concern by staff, as well as the south elevation. I'll point to a new rendering that was provided by the applicant that shows what views from Tanglewood Drive could look like. So here, this rendering shows that the house would still clearly be visible. And as the commission made the comment at the previous meeting, you get a look of a back of a house. So staff would recommend that the applicant study further ways to reduce this massing at the south side, and at bare minimum, increase the landscaping along Tanglewood Drive to decrease that visibility. We've received public comment this afternoon, which has been forwarded to the commission and uploaded to the city's website. The comment letter states concerns with lot buildability, neighborhood compatibility, visibility from Tanglewood Drive, tree removal, and traffic safety. Staff recommends that the commission review the project, conduct a public hearing, provide direction to the applicant, and continue the item to February 10th so that the applicant can make revisions. Here for any questions.
Any questions for Jonathan? Okay, let's move on to Mr. Mazzano?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And can you see me?
No.
Oh, let's see. Oh, here we go. Where do I click on video?
Upper right-hand corner.
Right.
My screen, it's at the lower left-hand corner.
Oh, there I go. Okay. Good afternoon or good evening. Thank you very much for having this meeting. Jonathan, if I could get the screen share, do I just click it myself?
Yes, you can click that green button there.
Okay. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to go through, thank you, Jonathan, for the presentation. These are the drawings in our file. I did want to make a clarification on the landscaping plan. I had actually, we're adding plants along here in between the existing trees. Existing trees are shown in gray. They're located directly over the areas that were shot by the survey. And so you can see with the different graphics where we're planning on planting oak trees all along here. So there's a couple little gaps here that we could fill in to help the view from Tanglewood as you descend here. And then these landscaping plans have been assigned with compatible Northern California plants that grow in oak and creek lands. So I just did want to clarify that we are actually adding some trees along here. As you can see with the constraints here, there's just not a lot of room. I was thinking before the meeting where we could step back the floors without losing some square footage. I know that's not a criteria exactly, but we're sort of pushed against a limit right now. So what I would say is you can see the thickness of this pilaster. That's just a built up pilaster. Typically these back retaining walls will probably be about 10 inches, I would say, just this retaining wall here. So what I think I could do is I could raise this retaining wall with this shoulder here and perhaps make the retaining wall a little thicker here. So right, this standoff here can actually be raised up to an area that would then afford a relief of the upper floor. See this line here, retaining wall, and along this side, we can bring this retaining wall up and we could push this wall in a little bit. So this area here would be stepped and the break of this 2-floor plane would be right about here. And it would be maybe a 6-inch step in, and that what Jonathan was saying, a shaving of the this step in wall. So I think that would suffice. Also, I was thinking, Jonathan, I think had a little bit of concern about the length of this plane of the roof, and what I think I can do, since in the let's see, where am I looking? Upper floor. In the master here, similar to this area here where I was able to actually drop the plate a little bit, I would be able to drop the plate slightly here to get a differentiation of roofs in this plane here. So like this roof steps up, this is the higher roof and it steps down. I could do something similar where this roof remains high and then it would step down. And in the upper level floor, I think I can do that because right here at this vestibule and the stairs, you can see I can have a little bit lower plate here because we're still coming up the stairs. And by the time we get to this vestibule, you can see we have plenty of headroom. Right now, this is the 8-foot plate that we spring from. So I can work with these curved trusses and help differentiate the roof plane as it goes along. So I think between having this wall plane here rise and then step up on both the back and the side elevation, that would suffice in the upper floor stepping back. And then the roof itself with the 3 steps, 2 on either side being lower and the one in the center being a slightly higher. This roof plane here could come down a little bit like this roof plane. I think that would create the visual interest. Then I did look, I'm not a very good web browser for images and inspirations, but I did look and there was nothing that really, they're either industrial or very thin wire rails. I'd like to show you something here, maybe that would help explain. I worked on this afternoon. You can see, as described before, it would be a simple I-beam structure with a pan deck and poured concrete. And then these beams would sit out proud just slightly here. And this rail would actually be attached on the outboard side of the driveway itself. So I think and they could be welded right directly to these I-beams. The material along the back, I thought that this worked well with raising this retaining wall height or even a false wall to this level. That's where we'll get the step back. Dark green, as well as this underside here would be all the dark green dyed concrete. So I think those were the main questions. Now on the drawings, I do apologize that I had misunderstood the section for the privacy that you were asking for, because when I got back and I was looking at my notes, I noticed that this was the first one we did and showed in our original. And when you said to the northwest, I said, well, this one is almost going to be about the same as that one. So I did this privacy study this way, and that's what my section is showing. This is the one that was added. Excuse me. This was the one that was added to this house I'll go to the context map. A lot of drawings here. So let me make sure I'm understanding. You wanted the privacy section through here. I can't remember which commissioner asked, but is this the correct section that you want me to show in the next meeting?
Yes, it is. That neighbor in particular expressed a question on the screening to their property.
Okay. And with that, we have an area right in here. We're sort of restricted on the planting along the driveway because we have to get access. But after we get past, we can plant here. So I'll do that section showing this house to the best of my ability as far as the elevation relative to this house. And then you'll see where the fence is, and if there's an issue, I'll augment the planting along here. So I apologize for that. I had misunderstood. I was doing my best to write down the notes, but and then Jonathan, just a question. Prior to the COVID and stuff, when the meeting notes would be transcribed and emailed out, is there something similar to that? I did look on the website today for our last DRC, and I didn't see any transcribed meeting notes. Is that still something that's being done or with COVID, or is that sort of being put on hold? so that I'm just understanding and making sure I understand the comments the way you and the commissioners made it.
Okay. Yeah, Sarah, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we are still doing them, and the DRC will approve the minutes through as a consent calendar item. But there is a little bit of delay, so
Okay.
the meeting minutes will not get approved
Okay.
by the next meeting.
All right. So as I understand, for the next time, you want this section shown for the privacy, the step backs of the, let's see, the step backs of the upper floor. I can do that along.
That's 10 minutes, just as a.
Okay, this wall and then this wall, and then I'll actually do a cross section. I'll try to find some inspirations of the metal and concrete bridge. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any questions from the applicant, for the applicant? Okay. Let's move on to community comments. Do we have any raised hands this evening?
We do. So if you would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand using the raise your hand function or *9 if you're calling in. And Rory Snyder has been admitted to the meeting. Rory, you are in. If you would like to unmute yourself and make your comments, you have 3 minutes. Rory, are you there?
You may be muted.
I've asked him to unmute using that function, but
Now can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Okay, I wanted to reiterate our request for a bond before construction begins to protect our road. You know, we have a private road that's going to be probably pretty well beat up during construction. Our president, David Dinnerman, wrote a nice email iterating that for the last meeting. I just want to repeat that. And I would also like to share a couple things on the screen. I haven't done that before. I just click the share screen.
Yes, Mike, if you want to stop sharing. There we go. And then Rory, that green button down there.
It still says somebody else is participating.
I did hit stop screen.
Can you see the picture I just put up?
No.
No. So
That's not working. I had a couple pictures of other houses in the neighborhood to show you that there's quite a difference between the design of this proposed structure and the rest of the neighborhood. And I imagine some of you already know that. So I won't do that, but I'll just go ahead and say breaking news. We have a neighbor, Ellen Anderson, who's been doing some research and found deeds for all of the previous owners of this plot. And I sent a copy of that to Jonathan. I don't know if he was able to get it out to the commissioners already or not. Were you?
We got Ellen's letter, yes.
Did you get the copy of the grant deed?
I have not distributed to the commission. The cutoff date for accepting new information would be around noon on the day of the meeting.
Okay, so we'll do that for the next meeting.
Perhaps. Again, I think one of the things that seems to be appearing on tonight is that somehow you're looking for us to undo what has been done by the Planning Commission and by the City Council. And we're not organized to do that. We're not approved to do that.
I didn't
So
intend to that. You
some of
mean
those
regarding the
issues like
bond?
The deed will not actually have much impact. What we're looking at tonight is mostly architectural design, lighting, landscaping, the appearance of the property.
Okay, I understand that. But this deed that our neighbor found, Ellen, are you available here? I think she might be on this. Anyway,
Okay,
you guys can take a
you're
look at
almost-
that.
You're
And
almost to the end of your 3 minutes, so if you want to wrap it
you
up.
guys can take a look at that deed and we can discuss it at the next meeting. That'd be okay?
Whatever is passed on to us by Jonathan. Okay,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
bye. Next.
Okay, we have one more public comments.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Oh, we can no longer hear you.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. Ellen Anderson. Okay, regarding this deed, Tack and Cindy Tam are not the owners of 777 Tanglewood Drive, the applicants Tack and Cindy Tam. Pursuant to the current grant deed recorded on August 31st, 2016, Dino Reggio, a single man, granted the property to Tack Cho Tam, an unmarried man, Alexander Tack Tam, a single man, and Victoria Land Tam, a single woman, all as joint tenants. You need to know that. So the applicants who have Tack and Cindy Tam, who have been listed this whole time for the last 5 years, do not own the property. The property went from Dino Reggio to these three people I just mentioned. Okay, and again, this parcel was never intended for construction. The well-established status is a non-conforming, unbuildable lot with an easement across the middle of the property to be used as a site for the drainage ditch. All the water from Tanglewood Drive, Tanglewood Lane, and Mountain View Drive flow in there. And as far as the design of the house is a rectangular box with the rear of the house closely facing Tanglewood Drive. The square footage of the proposed building is supposed to be reduced to 1,500 square feet, yet remains at 2,449 square feet. This house looks like a prefabricated building in a mobile home park or industrial park in Concord or Pittsburgh, and does not blend in the Tanglewood neighborhood. And the exposed bridge and railing standards stand out and are not appropriate for the neighborhood. Driving on Tangle Road, a private road, and immediately viewing the rear of this large rectangular industrial box very close to the road would be an eyesore and ruin the gateway to the neighborhood and beauty of the neighborhood. No amount of new plants or trees will cover the building and make the building not visible from Tanglewood Drive. You can see it in the picture, it's obvious. The proposed house clearly doesn't fit in the neighborhood. Now, I hope all the commission members have visited the site and the neighborhood. And the proposed removal of 16 trees will result in permanent harm and diminish the beauty of the neighborhood. Cutting down 16 beautiful, mature trees constitutes raping the hillside. 13 of the 16 trees proposed to be removed are protected under the Lafayette Tree Ordinance and cannot be removed. Removal of these trees and grading of the site would impact the stability of the steep slope. It should also be noted that the city is suing PG&E for cutting down trees. Again, this fails on all fronts, like the 5 prior applications. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other public comments tonight? Sarah, you're muted.
I do not see any other public comments or hands raised at this time. So we can
Okay,
close the public
so
hearing.
it's rebuttal time by the builder or the applicant. Is he disappeared?
Mike, I think you're.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I thought I clicked it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to address the two neighbors, Rory Snyder. He asked if a bond could be placed prior to construction. I know that we've had conditions of approval in prior applications where portions of the road have been videotaped for acknowledgement of existing construction prior to construction. That mechanism, a bond or whatever, you know, I would have to leave that up to the owners and the attorneys as far as the legality and how that is handled on a private road. But we acknowledge that it's been requested. The styles of the other houses in the neighborhood, this was also brought up by Ellen. You drive through the neighborhood, and I've done this a couple of times. You know, the Tanglewood goes way up beyond this property and wraps around above it. And there's different style houses from, you know, some of the original late 1950s ranch styles to some more modern craftsmen. There's some quite large houses in the neighborhood on larger lots, and there's other 1970s houses that have like gambrel roofs. So there's many different styles. This might be one of the first. Now I admit I haven't seen each and every house. Some of them are tucked back, but this would be one of the first modern houses in there. But it's as far as characteristics of the neighborhood, the characteristic of the neighborhood is something that you will look at and see if a house of this aesthetic can be constructed. Over the past years and stuff from the planning commissions and the design reviews, the style of the house, the aesthetics of the house hasn't really been questioned. It's about some of the details of the house. The grant deed that Ellen brought up, I don't know how to respond to that. I've always been approached by TACTAM and Cindy Lawtam. I don't know who those other people are. I would assume that they're relatives or something, but I don't know if we need to change the application to those people for technicalities. I would be happy to accommodate updating the records. The mention about this not being a lot, that's been gone through city attorneys, everything. This is a lot of record. They've been paying taxes on it. The homeowners association has not been paying taxes on this lot. It's a private property that can be developed. There are other substandard lots in each zone as subdivisions are developed, and it's just something that happens, and they're actually developable. The thing about the 1,500 square foot, that might have been brought up by the neighbors. We've talked about this with the planning commission. The house of this size is adequate for the lot and today's construction standards. It was never a condition of approval or anything that a requirement from the planning commission or the DRC that this house be 1,500 square feet. Yes, we do have to cut down some trees, as most lots that have trees on them have to have some trees cut. There is nothing saying that protected trees cannot be cut down. They acknowledge that some of these trees are going to be cut down, and there's a replanting mitigation and in lieu of mitigation. And when all the dust settles with the approval of the project, hopefully the approval of the project, that in lieu of and the final planting will be resolved. A lot of the trees, there are a lot of trees there, and a lot of them are in very poor health. With the ivy, this lot has not been maintained. It's got a lot of stuff on it. So clearing some of the old trees, placing the house, and then replanting the trees, I think is going to be a benefit actually to the neighborhood. And then the stability of the road, that has been brought up. As some of you may know, with the construction of a house and an actual structured designed retaining wall, it can actually add stability to the roadside itself. But then again, that's maybe what the bond issue is. So those are my rebuttal comments, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Mike from the commissioners? Okay, why don't we move on to discussion? Is there anyone who would like to start this?
I'd be happy to start.
Okay, John.
So I think that
Mike, you
from
can probably take down your screen. Go ahead,
Mike?
John. Sorry.
The changes we've seen between the last presentation and this presentation, I think there have been some improvements. I think some of the changes I would characterize as neutral regarding my own concerns about the design. In particular, I think the south facade, it remains problematic along Tanglewood Road. The center portion of that facade is very blank. And it's where you mostly have a stair, and you know, I would look for opportunities to enliven that regardless of the additional planting. Regarding the roof line, I mean, personally, I preferred the previous design. Maybe not everybody does, it's a matter of opinion, but the things that it did and the things, Mr. Masano, that you're talking about doing with this is there was a varied sort of ridge across the length of the building. I think increasing that variation, as you discussed earlier, regardless of whether it's a curved truss or a shed roof, it helps to break the line of that. I guess I would ask Mr. Masano for your confirmation that with the design changes you've talked about, will you stay within the height limit of the agreement with the Planning Commission? Is that your intent?
Yes, and actually I did have an exhibit that I sent back to Jonathan when he had that comment, that the original silhouette of the house was of a regular pitched gable roof. And I superimposed that on the drawing, and I don't know if Jonathan has that in his sets, but yeah, if we have to go back to Planning Commission to get that 1'8" height, I'd be happy to do that. I just thought that this roof was an improvement, but yeah, it's.
Yeah, I don't object to the curve, but I think the fact that it is got a fairly uniform top ridge is something that I think we all agree could be improved with some design refinements. So I would say those are my major comments: the south facade and the roof line. Regarding the ends of the building, I understand that you just don't have a lot of buildable area here. I think there are probably moves you can make to strengthen a horizontal break there, but I do understand your challenges with getting a reasonable size house within the constraints here. So I would like to see if there's anything else you can do, but I don't have as strong a concern about those as I do about the south facade. And I think your north facade, I think, is very nice.
Okay, who will be next? Eugene? Oh, Armin raised his hand.
Okay, good.
You got a couple minutes grace there. Go ahead, Armin.
Sure. I agree with John's comments. I would like to add to that. And again, I don't have issues with this style, but when I'm looking at the 3D view at the old view from the Tanglewood heading up on sheet A 3.3, the roof variation looks much nicer than the updates. And again, I think it's away from the style of the design, but it's more about the articulation. And a couple of things I could suggest to help improving the south elevation and also the roof line is that, and I'm asking the architect if he could consider such a thing, is that what if the curve would kind of mirror itself along a shear line on the plan. If I look at the plan, there is almost a kind of continuous line which is going through the master bedroom and the side of the stair. What if the roof could mirror within that line? So it's kind of like turning up on both sides, so it doesn't just curve down towards the south as it's kind of like becoming back of the project. It becomes almost like a butterfly, but with curved structure. That's one question. And I'm just recommending to look at his work. Glenn Morcott, he's an Australian architect that has done projects, beautiful projects with similar style, but it's, I think it's the level of the articulation that's missing here. That's adding that variation of the roof line and just exposing the structure, just how do you carry the load from the roof to the walls and farther down. And I think that's level of refinement is missing here. The other comment I have is about the size of the openings on the south elevation. It seems that they have been intentionally small because of the privacy issue. Is that right?
On the south, yeah, it's really, you can see on the south elevation the line of Tanglewood up on the second floor and actually intersects some of the windows. So we didn't want large windows because you're just looking right out into this hillside. You can see there on this the west elevation, which is sort of a section through the hillside. So yeah, the lower right windows are in the garage. The lower left windows are into the kitchen where we have cabinets and we have the windows over the cabinets. So it was sort of a function of use inside, and it's a garage. We just wanted to get some high windows there.
Right, right. On the upper left, I think, if there would be some sort of articulation, whether it's kind of like, since that's also south-facing elevation, maybe it's a sunshade or something that kind of adds to the depth of the elevation. I think that could also help with adding more texture along that facade. Those are my comments.
Okay, Eugene?
Oh, it's my turn. Okay, great. So my comments are really about the side elevations and the back. And there's been an attempt to address our concerns from previous meeting, but I feel it's still not there yet. And I'm not the architect on this project, but Mr. Musano, I know you're trying hard, but I still don't see, proportionally speaking, when you break up the mass at the base like that with the concrete, and when then the upper level with the wood siding, the leftover harmonic proportion, or I usually draw diagonals to see where those relationships are, and I don't see any really, what I'm talking about is maybe the clarity of expression or the resolution of the disparate elements coming together to conjure some kind of a poetic statement on that those facades are still highly desirable. So let me just first state that I, as one commissioner, I look at history and precedent and context in slightly relativistic term. We can talk about the trend and the expressions of history and the traditions, but in new epoch, in the 21st century, we ought to be open-minded with some refreshing new way of reconstituting the vocabulary, as long as one can really understand the characteristic of the neighborhood, and stylistically or aesthetically, we can be open-minded with relatively different ways of expressing that in the 21st century to express the current epoch that we all live in, with new materiality and new type of lifestyle that are exuded in these new houses that are coming before us. So on the point about the side elevation, again, I still don't see the proportions there, the window openings and the door there. I'm talking about both the east and west side, and then the back side is still also unresolved. And I'm not here to give you all the ways to go about it, but it's not there yet. On the south side, I feel that part shows, expresses the internal organ of the building and the residential character that is being exuded to the community, and very transparent. But other areas need to be like more like a wall and have privacy, of course, but there are probably some poetic ways to express that. The other thing that is desirable, I believe, in a residential character building, if it is to try to undo the thinking of the neighbors that this is looking like something else, is what are the housing characteristics, like fireplaces, chimneys, balconies, some kind of free lifestyle form that are in the life of the family in this building. Of course, it's a private residence, but in order to undo the box, I say take some of those notions and try to further articulate the facade. Because right now, I look at the south, it does express the lifestyle, and again, it's private, so we don't need to get into privacy. But again, from an aesthetic expression, it doesn't look like a box. But when I turn the corner, the side elevation and the rear, it just looks like a hodgepodge of horizontal slices, relatively squarish rectangular things that are in the holes. It doesn't really give me a consistent language. So that's it. I know I'm being a little bit vague tonight, but Mr. Musano, I think you have some further work to do to convince me on this two side elevations and rear. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Kristen?
So I'll pick up, or I'll start with the south elevation, because that's been a big topic. And as I look more closely at it, I'm a little less bothered, I think, than everyone else, because I'm realizing as I look at A 3.2, where the line of the road is. So if that's accurate, although it feels a little different when we look at the rendering driving up the street, it looks like you actually don't, like most of that elevation is below grade. So I think it would be helpful to understand like how much of that house we really see on the side and what the perspective on that is. Because if the drawing, the south elevation on A 3.2 is pretty accurate, I think the sense of it being a really solid dominant wall is actually quite concealed. And I think that would do a lot to allay my concerns about it being so out of character. I think in some ways this elevation is potentially misleading us. So that would be one thing I'd want to understand better. And then thinking about the east and west elevations, I agree that they have a verticality and a skinniness that feels inconsistent with the horizontal language that we've been talking about. And admittedly, given the buildable footprint on the lot, it's pretty hard to compete with that. But as I look at the east elevation and the railing of the bridge, I almost wonder if that might be a way to start having some more horizontally expressive elements. So I don't actually mind the railing that's on the bridge, but I wonder if that railing were to become more solid and more integrated with how we read the east elevation, if that would do something to start giving it some of that shifting and horizontality that Jonathan mentioned when he mentioned like shaving off or having some slight offsets in the building. I think that the bridge might be a way to achieve some of that without sacrificing any square footage in the building itself. And I think it probably would go further than just extending that retaining wall up, which I don't think is going to be really perceptible in a detailed way that gives a sense of the proportion and massing.
Okay, my comments. I visited the site again, and let's start with the south elevation. So from my driving up on Tanglewood is that I can't tell you exactly where, but when you're about halfway the height of the garage floor and you look towards the west, I guess that would be the west, or look as you're traveling into Tanglewood, you actually do see all that foundation wall and everything in there. Okay, it is very visible. And when it is visible, it does show it as a long plane of one large plane. And while there is a little indentation near the kitchen end of about a foot, it really doesn't project when you're driving up the street. You don't even see that little deviation. You're just going to see it as one large massive wall. So I think that, bumping up the foundation wall isn't going to do it. I don't think that does it at all. I mean, I had a couple things tentatively. I think one would be is maybe change the material completely at the stairwell and maybe introduce cultured stone or something in that area that would make it look more in character with other houses in the neighborhood and still not kill the more modern contemporary look that it has. And that way the material itself will be more a greater contrast so that it will really cut it off from, because right now when you keep that stucco material the whole length, it continues to make it look like one long thing. Whereas even if you're not have much articulation with the cultured stone, it's a dramatic change in material, and it could be a dramatic change in color as well. It doesn't need to be quite as toned down to that gray and brown tone. I think you can play around with that. As far as the east elevation goes, well, let me talk about the roof for a minute. I had no problem with the shed roof. I have actually no problem with the curved roof either, although I think your suggestion about popping up the middle of the curved roof and bringing down the east and the west end is a way to go with it. I would definitely, if you keep with the curved roof, that's what I would do. I'm actually thinking that maybe the curved roof is something that can be added to the lower level on the east elevation instead of the boxed in little soffitted area above the door and the window. And basically, even though you haven't changed the plane of the wall itself, it's going to change the appearance of that. It won't be that long, thin height. You'll be able to introduce a curve in there or something that would change that. Or the other option is to push out the garage, the width of the garage a little bit and narrow down the 6 foot of that walkway to a smaller dimension. I think there are some options that are better than just playing around with foundation walls that are only going to give you 4 to 6 inches or something and not really change the character of the structure. So, and I also liked Kristen's suggestion about the railing. That would be the other option. It wouldn't go along with the curved roof, but if you change the railing, I think again, you can change the appearance quite a bit so that it doesn't appear to be such a long, skinny eastern facade. Landscaping, yeah, it needed the bushes or it needed intermediates along Tanglewood. I think that's an improvement. I just want to mark one other thing, I guess, that for the record is that we talked about that the what do you call it? the conditions by the homeowners association. In response to that is that, and Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong, but on regards to private roads, we don't get involved in zoning, we suggest that it's a way of approaching it, photographing, so on and so forth. Because it is a private road, the city is basically, it washes its hands from that obligation. So it's something that will have to be handled through the homeowners association and whatever they already have in place. Okay, so I guess we're going to ask for a continuance into the first meeting in February, if that works for the architect. And do we need to summarize any more of the comments that were made? I mean, you got a lot of suggestions, but I think the main thing is people are concerned about the east and the south facade.
Correct. Thank you. And the continuation does work for me.
Okay, any other comments by commissioners?
Can I make one last comment about the east elevation? I think, looking at the elevations, wrapping the balcony on which is on the master bedroom on the north and east, I think that could help to just bring some sort of consistency between the elevations. As now all the balconies, they're facing north, and the other ones, I think, kind of goes back with the programs of those interior spaces, but this is the one that has that opportunity. So I think that could help of extending that horizontality along the east.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
So piggybacking on Armin's comment, I did mention at the last meeting about taking some elements to wrap the corner like that, like a railing or window, so that you're not staying within the rigid box vocabulary, but dematerialize corners if you can, where the program of the room or space is at that area where you can have an opportunity to create a real, like a window in the corner or a guardrail that wrapped the corner. So you're kind of loosening and dematerializing the corners. Okay, thank you, Armin, appreciate that.
Okay, so do we have a resolution by commissioner?
I make a motion to continue this item to, what was that date again? Date specific, February?
February 10th, I
No,
believe.
we can't do that? Okay, well, forget that motion.
Huh?
I'll take that back. I took it back, Chair. Okay, at your pleasure, Chair. So,
No, I think you were on the right track. Continuing to.
yeah, so I'll make a motion to continue.
To February 10th.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
We have a second on the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye. Armin?
Aye.
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Eugene said aye already.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And Glenn says aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, what do we have? The last agenda item is ARC, or let's see what it is. Other new public hearings. Okay, other business, ARC. Well, I will continue to be the ARC volunteer, although I will open it up in the near future for anyone who wants to take a crack at it. Yes, Jonathan.
I appreciate you volunteering again. So just so you know, the ARC is on Friday, and we are going to be starting back up, trying to do not in-person meetings, but we're going to do Zoom meetings Friday mornings at, so this Friday is scheduled at 9:30. So if you volunteer, you're volunteering for a Zoom meeting at 9:30. And I also wanted to say that we'd appreciate transitioning in some of our new commissioners to see what ARC is like. So
yes,
I'd recommend Glenn attend, and then one of the commissioners that hasn't attended yet could also sit in just to see how it's done.
Okay. Either Armin or Kristen, are you available? If you're not available this week, we can do it in the future. So
I can join. Right. How long does it take usually?
It depends on the number of items. There's only 2 items on this agenda, so it should be less than half an hour.
Sure.
Yeah, usually less than 20 minutes, actually, in most cases. Okay, so we have 2 people that you can put down to send messages to for us to connect on Zoom.
Yes, thank you both.
Okay, I wanted to bring up one item that sort of came to my attention, and actually it was reinforced at the city council meeting the other day. But one of the things that I discovered is through ARC is that some of the projects that we work on that are viewed by planning commission or city council afterwards, it would be nice if we got more of the feedback from staff. Because I think there's things that come up in those meetings that we're unaware of. One of the projects that came up in ARC was a project that we've seen before as a study session on Diablo Boulevard. They made some changes, and the comment that I made was it looked a lot like Brown Street. Now, two of the commissioners would probably know what I'm talking about Brown Street, number 1 Brown Street or whatever, Brown at Mount Diablo. And it turns out that the planning commission had a lot more problems with that project than we did because they thought that the workspaces were really not functionally big enough to be workspaces. And there was no conditions that required them to be workspaces. So they're a little concerned about turning ground floor Mount Diablo Boulevard into residential and not having some more interaction. Now, we created it with what we thought was more interaction by having the little front door on each one and so on and so forth. But they said that by the time you laid out furniture, it didn't really function very well, and there was no requirement, so on and so forth. So it has some bearing on this future project because, and one of the things that's going to happen on this future project is we're going to actually have a joint meeting between planning and design review on the project, consolidating. But and then also I sat in on the project that was on Golden Gate Way, and that was a large development. And it was interesting to hear community comments and the city council comments because it gave me an idea of what they were pushing for, what they weren't pushing for. And one of the things that did happen is that we don't get a lot of public comments by the public anymore. You notice that these meetings, we have 1 or 2 people on a project and that's it. And in the past, when we were meeting at the library, it wasn't unusual to get way more comments by people. And this has been an ongoing thing almost the entire COVID. And it turned out that there was a lot more concern about the privacy along Moraga Boulevard that really wasn't brought to our attention. And as a net result, there's some attempts to eliminate some balconies that look down on it, and whether there's some permanent tinting of some windows so that people can't, circumvent some of the privacy issues and so on and so forth. And I thought that it would be nice if some of the planners could give us some of that feedback that when they're sitting in on these subsequent meetings on planning, and it doesn't need to be extensive. I just mean, a real quick synopsis, a 2-minute synopsis written down and presented by Sarah or whoever, or by yourself if you're still present at the Zoom meeting. But I thought it would be beneficial to me and also beneficial to the other commissioners. Any comments?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, Chair. That'd be awesome. Get some of that feedback.
Yeah, I don't want to create a lot of work, but I do think
Yeah.
that there are some issues that, for instance, the issue about the ground floor, which, has some bearing on our future considerations. Not that we're doing everything that planning is doing, but at least we know, because some of the issues are, should it be seen by us first or by planning first, And I don't want all the architectural design done by planning and then we sort of have to sign off on it. On vice versa, is we're not going to do their job, but it would be nice to know where there's more issues. Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments, questions? I guess we're wrapped up for the evening. So enjoy
Happy New
yourself.
Year. Happy New Year, Chair. Happy New Year, everyone, right?
Happy New Year.
Yes.
Happy New
You
Year.
too.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you.
Everyone.
Bye,
night.
everybody.
Oh, do we make a motion to close the meeting tonight? Well,
No, we don't ever have a motion to close.
all
We
right.
leave.
We want you to stay on Zoom all night
right.
long, Eugene.
We
You
don't
have
want to do that.
to
Bye-bye.
stay there.
Bye, Kristen. Bye.
Good
Good
night.